I like that we're starting this program with so much love already. That's very sweet. I know we're expecting a few more folks, but I want to make sure just to jump in and get started because we have 4 amazing speakers to share with you all tonight, our 3 panelists and moderator. Want to make sure that we have a full hour together. So welcome everyone. It's so nice to see you all here for Taking Back Space, another one of our PAFA Pours events. I'm excited to welcome you to our conversation around the expansive ways artists are claiming visual and social space. I'm Abby King, the Assistant Director of Adult Programs here at PAFA. And to begin, I wanted to acknowledge that I, along with many of our speakers, and I assume some of our attendees, are speaking to you from the ancestral lands of the Lenni Lenape people, whose presence and resilience in Pennsylvania continues to this day. I'd like to take this opportunity to honor the original caretakers of this land and recognize the histories of land theft, violence, erasure that have brought our institutions and ourselves here this evening. I also wanted to, of course, welcome our many PAFA members who are here with us. I see some colleagues on this call, some students, and I also hope that I see some folks from our partner tonight, which is the Attic Youth Center. We're so happy to welcome you all here with us as well, and just welcome to everybody for spending your Tuesday evening on Zoom with us. For today's program, as you can see, we're recording, so this will be uploaded later to YouTube. So if you know of any folks who wanted to be here this evening and couldn't, I will drop a link to where that will live in a few moments. And I'm going to hand things over to our fantastic speakers who are going to introduce themselves in just a moment and share a beautiful PowerPoint and then be in dialogue. And the moderator this evening is Dr. Brittany Webb. I'm so glad to have my colleague here with us. And just note that we will also have time, before I introduce folks, we will have time at the end for questions. So feel free to drop things in the chat as we go. We want to hear from you, and we will make sure to share some space, save some space. Sorry, so many space words in my head. Save some space at the end to hear from all of you. So this evening, I'm proud to hand things over to our panelists. We have Candy Alexandra, icon Ebony Fierce, and Natalia Villarán Quiñones. So thank you all so much for being here and sharing your artwork and your time with us. Brittany, I'll hand it over to you to start sharing your screen.
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. Happy summer, happy Pride. I am Brittany Webb. I'm one of the co-curators of the exhibition Taking Space, Contemporary Women Artists and the Politics of Scale at PAFA, for folks who don't know me. And I'm excited to be in conversation with these 3 incredible artists tonight. So let's start, I think, with images, just to dive first into the work. Candy, can we kick it off to you? Talk to us a bit about your practice, your media. What should we know about you and your work?
Oh, Brittany, thank you so much. Abby, thank you so much. My name is Candy Alexandra Gonzalez. I am a multidisciplinary visual artist and trauma-informed educator. Usually the best way to introduce myself is to tell people that I'm a Gemini, which means that I do a little bit of everything. My training is in book arts and printmaking. I received my MFA from the University of the Arts in 2017 with a specialization in papermaking. That being said, you know, I also practice photography. I write poetry. I've started dabbling in mural making and public art, and another one of my big artistic practices is altar making. So when I was an MFA student, a lot of my work actually was centered on immigrant narratives and migrant stories. Mostly I was sharing a lot of my parents' stories because, you know, they both had crossed the US-Mexico border way back. And, you know, at some point after that, like, I realized there's a lot of healing that I need to do within myself. There's a lot of work that I need to do internally. I was really around 2017, 2018, coming to terms with the fact that I had a really poor relationship with myself, with my body. And I was challenging myself to explore that and to get on the path of healing in some way, and my art was the vehicle that allowed me to do that. It started with poetry and just writing, and you being honest with myself, and just acknowledging and holding space for years of pain. And then, it translated into photography. So I was doing the 40th Street Artist in Residence program in West Philly. And I had a lot of poetry, and I had a show coming up, and I was like, am I just gonna put poems on the wall? No. And then I started practicing with self-portraits, also out of the realization that I hated seeing myself in pictures. I hated having people like take pictures of me or document me. It was just such an ugly relationship, such a long and ugly relationship, that I was like, well, I think, when I challenge myself and put myself in a position where I'm a little uncomfortable, but I get to like confront the fear face to face, it will allow me to grow and like move on from that. And self-portraiture was one of the first steps that I took to do that. So in this image that's in front of you, I was exploring a lot with long exposures. I was sitting under a hot lamp, low lighting, and in order to get a long exposure, you have to sit there for a long period of time. I was also exploring photographing myself with corsets and body shapers, which is something that I used to wear a lot when I was a kid. We live in a very fat phobic society, right? And so I was encouraged as a fat kid to change my body a lot, right? And so again, it was just that moment of confrontation with and really looking at the fear directly in the face almost. Because I was working with long exposures, I was also playing with movements, right? I was exploring that as well. Brittany, could you switch this is another image where I am just exploring with putting on a body shaper while taking long exposures. And this project was the seed for many things that came after. It was a really, really big and important step for me personally in my own life, and then also artistically. I was starting to get really personal, really vulnerable, and realizing that I had to do a lot of body healing, and a lot of self-reconciliation in order to live my best and my fullest and my most authentic and my most joyful life, right? There's ways in which, yes, society is still very much fat phobic, and it will be so for a while. I can see that. And, I can take ownership and I can take my power back, and this series was a way in which I started to do that. Brittany, can you change the slide, please? And then this was right before the pandemic. I had the opportunity to do a fellowship at a papermaking studio in New York City, in Brooklyn specifically. And I went there with a lot of poems and a lot of photos. And I was like, how am I going to translate this into papermaking media? Papermaking for me is a spiritual practice, just like my altar practice. It's a spiritual practice. And actually, the origin of papermaking is that of an offering, right? It is that of a spiritual practice. And I didn't know that when I became a papermaker, but I learned that after. And so I very much feel very spiritually connected to this medium. I realized after meeting Ofelia Esparza, who is a lifelong altarista, an altar maker, and a recipient of the National Endowment of the Arts Fellowship for that commitment to that practice, I realized that, that's something that I wanted to bring forth more intentionally into my practice. I had been exploring with altars previously in like very subtle ways. And so I felt like I just needed to explore that more. And especially when it came to healing, because altars are a healing practice. It's an ancestral practice. It's it's my family's practice. It's my mom's. I inherited that. And so I felt like this was another way in which I could really engage my lineage, I can engage my culture, and I can engage healing. So all of this is handmade paper, even the paintings. It's this practice called pulp painting, where I'm literally painting with a paper pulp that's been pigmented different colors on a fresh sheet of handmade paper. And yeah, this was exhibited at Brick Gallery in New York City. And since then, the panini press has been a little shaky, but has made things a little shaky for me in terms of my paper making practice, but I continue to explore photographically. I continue to explore through poetry, and hope that I will come around to this in the future. That's me.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I can't help but notice it's really lovely that, you sort of created this altar with your work at the center of it. There's a kind of reclaiming there that's just like really lovely and beautiful in the context of how you describe your relationship between your life and your artwork. Um, so I'm hoping we can hear from icon Ebony Fierce. Please introduce us to your work, to your artistic practice. Tell us what we should know about you.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Icon Ebony Fierce. Um, Thank you, Abby, and thank you, Brittany, for having me be a part of this. I love this. So I'm a drag performer, performance artist. I'm also a curator and a producer here in Philadelphia. I've been emceeing like queer events for almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years next year. I cannot believe it. um, so I guess I can just start from the beginning. Well, these photos were from last week, which was Pride Weekend here in Philly. And the reason why I wanted to share these photos is because when, you know, when my friend took these photos of me, I thought that, wow, this is like really full circle for me. Because like 9 years ago, when I first started performing, I was just this young black, fat queer femme that just wanted to just be on stage and wanting to spread the message of just being you and being queer and being um, multi-gendered and being an experience within yourself. And at first, people didn't really get it. And of course, like in more queer radical spaces, people didn't get it. But people got it. But when I started venturing out into the neighborhood and started participating in performing in drag shows, um, immediately I got shut down because my aesthetic was more so grungy, and I always wanted to embrace my own body. I didn't wear breasts. I had my natural body hair and everything because I thought that drag was more so about, an enhancement of who you are as a person as far as your gender is concerned. So, down the line, when I started doing competition shows, I kind of changed myself up, started, cinching my waist, starting wearing a bra, started shaving my body hair because I was tired of getting picked apart by a bunch of cis people in the audience, especially cis white people in the audience all the time, because the drag scene in the gay community can be very brutal. And I went through a lot of brutal things throughout my journey as a queer artist. So I started creating spaces for myself. I joined Freaking Queer, which is a production company that started in 2011. And I was instantly relieved that there were a lot of, artists all throughout Philadelphia that are queer and that are radical and that did more than just one style of performance. There were like punk bands, there were drag queens, there were burlesque performers, there were like everyone in between, and a lot of people looked like me. So throughout time, I started meshing my experiences um, as a performer outside of the neighborhood and inside the neighborhood together, and started creating spaces for not only myself, but spaces for other Black queer people in Philadelphia. And throughout time, I've, you know, done numerous events all throughout the city that centered Black and brown queer folks and queer performers, because they didn't have anywhere else to go. They didn't get booked in various spaces. Um, and when they and if they were in various spaces, they didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel comfortable. So I had no choice but to just be me and do me somewhere else. And it all went well. Um, so years down the line, during the pandemic, me, Vinchell, who's another drag artist in Amber Heights, along with a bunch of other Black queer performers, did a town hall. And we decided to call out all of the white performers and producers and club owners for numerous things, as far as, tokenizing Black performers, not booking enough Black performers. Because after a while, the only Black performers you would see and they would get booked were 5. And I was one of them. And I was barely booked in a bunch of them, which is ridiculous. Out of, I think we counted at least 50 Black performers in the city. 50, over 50. So naturally, we were like, okay, so what's going on here? We got to call this out. So that town hall garnered thousands and thousands and thousands of views. And we made numerous producers step down, including an event producer at Taboo Lounge and Sports Bar, which allowed me to become the event producer of Taboo Lounge and Sports Bar last year. And now the event producer at Woody's, Voyeur, and Taboo are now Black young queer folks. And this year I was like, this is the first Pride I get to create spaces and shows centering, Black trans folks. And Pride weekend, 2/3 of the shows were ran by Black queer folks. One of them were Black trans folks. And during this brunch, I was like, here I am now, just like, I have my own natural body. I'm representing for, my love for Black icons like Phyllis Hyman and Grace Jones and Kevin Aviance, just twirling and just living my best life during Pride weekend at brunch. And for me, when I saw these photos, it just all came full circle for me. Can you go to the next slide? So I just wanted to share here my my photo shoot with Samantha Satan, who is a queer trans photographer in Philadelphia. My passion also is in the beauty, the artistry, and the aesthetic of high fashion. And I often see that like people that look like me aren't represented in high fashion and in magazines and stuff and on runways. And I was like, listen, I'm going to create my own editorial. And I want to show that like anybody can be fierce, anybody can be glamorous, and everyone can be edgy. And you don't have to be skinny and white and or androgynous to be a vision of what you want to be. That's why I love these photos so much, because it just reminds me of a lot of the things that I seen when I grew up, like from people like Grace Jones, Madonna, and everyone in between. I'm like, I can embody these things. I can be those things. I can create those own for me. So yeah, overall, I just want to show people that it is possible. It's a journey, and sometimes it's not easy, but it is possible. And if there's not a space for you, you can create the space for yourself and other people, because you never know if other people are wanting a space for them. They're just waiting for someone to just help out and extend that branch. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm also, I'm loving this sort of continuing thread of of having your body and your work and the intervention that makes. I also, can I just say, one of the things that I love, love, love about these images is just that, first of all, self-portraiture is it's so fun to think with in this conversation. And it's like such an incredible reminder that gender is a performance, gender is a human technology. And so to watch you just masterfully wield these tools and techniques of gender and femininity through makeup, like this hyper competent, amazing application of makeup, like that in and of itself that's its own kind of art, to make the art on your face as a canvas. And that just, thank you for giving us that.
Thank you. I love makeup. I love it.
Yes. Natalia, why don't you introduce yourself and your art to us, please?
Hello. Well, my name is Natalia. Well, my full name is Natalia Merced Villarán Quiñones. I've been living in Philadelphia for about 7 years now, born and raised in Puerto Rico. And for as long as I can remember, I've been writing poetry. My grandfather was a poet, and my mother, as I was growing up, always encouraged me to write. I remember that I was in elementary school when she was telling me, I know that you can write a story. I know that you can write it. And I was just dismissive. And I remember clearly my mom and I having this conversation and me just being like over it and literally writing her a story about twin sisters that went on an adventure. So just my mom could just stop. I was just like, here, Mom, I can do this. Okay, now just let's drop it. And after that, I just kept writing, and I always wrote about things that I was experiencing, my emotions, how I thought I could have navigated a situation better, how I was feeling about somebody, how I'm feeling about something, about dreams, because to me, my dreams are always trying to communicate me something. I am in constant conversations with my ancestors through my dreams, and I see them in my dreams. So that's something that I like to literally keep, a record of. So I always have with me a pencil and a notebook. I always have a pen. I always have a piece of paper somewhere with me all the time, because whenever I just feel that need to, or that urge to write, I need to have something where I can. And just like using my phone is not fast enough. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else. I just need to have like the pencil, like I do right now in my hand. And as I was growing up and I understood that, you know, I understood my Blackness because of my mom. I understood that I was a bigger child because my mom had to literally explain that to me. And because of several instances where she had to pull out my birth certificate to prove to people that I was a child while we were trying to attend children activities like children festivals, something like Disney on Ice, something like that. Like she had to bring my birth certificate out because I was taller, I was bigger, and because I was a Black child. And understanding that growing up, that meant that I knew that I couldn't fight kids like my other friends were fighting kids because I could get in trouble. Because even if they were the ones coming after me, my body was a bigger body, and that automatically made me at fault. My body was, you know, a problem. So it was, you know, treated as such. So I learned how to stay behind and kind of to like blend in so people would not notice me. So they didn't see my body. They couldn't, you know, point at me and, you know, say whatever they wanted to say. And writing helped me navigate all that. This one poem I have up was actually published at Metropolarity. It's a zine here from Philadelphia from an Afrofuturist group. Amazing work that they've been doing here in Philadelphia. And this is literally me talking about that constant fear of like, you know, vigilance and understanding that, you know, I had to look at myself in like different ways to be able to visualize something greater for me, if that makes any sense. But the title is Constante Miedo Constante, which is constant fear constant. Vivo en esta dimensión paralela a un universo infinito donde todo lo que pienso, escribo y digo se vuelve realidad, donde se desatan las peores catástrofes y fenómenos naturales, donde mi saliva sirve para cauterizar heridas dejadas por las guerras internas que nunca acaban, donde se pagan alimentos con besos, abrazos y canciones, y $1 te sirve para dejar notas de amor a tus enemigos. Se vive sin prisa, con pausa y júbilo, donde todos los androides han sido desactivados. Los árboles y sus frutos alimentan las masas que se reúnen en las plazas a danzar en nombre de los dioses, celebrando otro día, otra noche, otro atardecer rodeados de prosperidad. Cada desplazamiento del cuerpo, alto, bajo, delgado, obeso, es visto como un regocijo. Cada puesta del sol y cada amanecer es un tributo. Cada abrir y cerrar de ojos es una celebración más, infinita y recurrente en esta dimensión. Me gusta permanecer largos periodos de tiempo en ella, donde soy una desconocida entre caras familiares. And I know there's a little bit at the bottom and I'm unable to see. But yeah, I'm pretty much talking about, you know, trauma in bodies and how we can move forward from that, how we can see our bodies as something to celebrate, to bring into community together and to literally care for each other. We can go to the next slide. And I will read this one and be, you know, brief about it, be mindful of time. This one is specifically about my moving to the United States and my body looking at everything from here. And it was translated in English. This was published in a book called Puerto Rico Mi Corazón, which is an anthology of poems from different Puerto Ricans in the diaspora. And it's Desde Afuera, and North. Sigo tomando con pinzas cada verso que escribo, aún sin descifrar mi existencia, aún sin respirar, aún sin poder moverme de la esquina designada como mi nuevo hogar. Es que aún no logro descifrar el tiempo y el movimiento de mis pechos o tus dedos en mi pelo y tu aliento consumiendo mi soledad. Sola, sigo sin rumbo fijo, finita e indefinida, con la sangre constantemente ahogando mis sollozos, pero sigo aquí.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think first I want to speak for all attendees and thank you all just for showing up today as your gorgeous, creative, artistic selves. I thought it would be great to sort of kick off the discussion by thinking about some of the threads that move across your work. Movement was one that I had been thinking about as a theme that runs through all of your work, in our conversations preparing for this panel. And I've been reading Sonia Renee Taylor's The Body is Not an Apology. And so she writes really beautifully about movement in the book. And so there's a way, icon Ebony, the way you perform, Candy, the way even your long exposures suggest a kind of movement. There's the sort of the trace of the sweep of a hand or of a head in your photographs. Natalia, I think so much about the way you talk about how the disciplining of bodies as you move through physical space, but also the importance of, diaspora and moving, that movement is such a structuring theme throughout your practice. And I wanted to think with this, this idea that Taylor writes about as a kind of self-love practice. And so in this section of the book, she's thinking about radical self-love as a practice that requires cultivation and requires our rethinking what we've learned socially about the idea of bodies as too big or too dark or too queer or too wrong according to social hierarchies to essentially move through space. And so she writes about this pillar, this idea of unapologetic action. She says radical self-love is a muscle, and that, quoting here, body shame has severed our love of activity. In the chronicles of body shame, movement became a thing we avoided, lest we jiggle while in motion. Unapologetic action is our departure from those old stories, prompting us to reconnect to the joys of movement. Many of us cannot recall a time when moving our bodies was something other than a way to punish them for failing to meet society's fictitious ideals. But just as we were once babies who loved our bodies, we were also babies who loved moving them. We can invite ourselves back to this place. There was magic there. And so I wanna stop the share just so I can see everyone a bit better. But I thought it might be nice to just start there, start thinking about movement, the importance of movement in your practice, movement for your thinking, and how both you're thinking about movement in your work and also how your work is affecting how you move, either through space, how you move through the world, or how you're moving in your art. And anyone can start.
You can go first. I know that while we're having a conversation around that quote, I mentioned my love of dancing and how growing up, I was, as a child, involved in like all this dancing groups. And I was a cheerleader during elementary and middle school, and even wanted to be, as a part of like what we call batuteras. I don't know if anybody else has heard that, but it's basically like twirling, dancing, and that whole thing that some of the cheerleaders do as well. And I was always, you know, shut down because I was too big. I was too big to, you know, be able to do X, Y, or Z. Like, you know, you cannot be a, you know, choreographer because you're too big to, you know, do that. And I was just like, but I can dance. I don't understand what you mean. If I can dance, why can't I be a choreographer? But there's only, you know, so many times that you can hear that it starts really to work on you. So as I, you know, grew up, even thinking about performing as standing up in front of people and reading my poetry was terrifying because they could see my body. And I didn't want anybody to see my body, you know, if I could keep it in a way that, you know, I didn't have to do that. So, and I had in college a lot of friends that were very encouraging, and they were like, yeah, you could do this. Like, you know, your stuff is good. Just, you know, go for it. But I I had to perform in front of others. So that was there. But as soon as I was out with my friends and it was just like hitting the dance floor, that was not in my brain. I was just moving. I was dancing. I was enjoying the beat. So I love, for me, going out to dance with my friends was huge, because that was how I was able to literally ground my body and feel connected with my body. Like those instances when my friends were like, let's go to the club, I was like, yes, I'm ready. Let's go. So whether it was me going to hardcore punk shows, goth clubs to dance, shout out to some of my goth friends that I know are here. If it was to salsa, merengue, whatever, reggaeton, you name it, bachata, I was there. I was not gonna miss a party because that meant that I could move my body to the rhythm of whatever music was playing, and I was all up for that anytime. And I still am. Like, one of the things that I miss the most is being able to be in community with folks and dance. And one instance I will never forget was when I went to the Allied Media Conference back in, this was 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And I was able to be in community with so many Black, Brown, and Indigenous people from all over the world. And we all gathered to this house party. And when I looked around, I was just like, oh my God, everybody looked like me for the most part. And I was just blown away. We were in Detroit, and it was the first time ever since I moved to the States that I saw a crowd that looked like home. And I was just like, oh my God, I can move here and people are not gonna look at me like, what are you doing? You know, we were all moving and enjoying our bodies and dancing and just allowing ourselves to be without any kind of judgments. And that experience moving forward changed it for me. So I try to make sure that, you know, I went into more trauma-informed teaching workshops, and I actively seek spaces where I could learn about, you know, fat phobia. And that's how I stumbled with Sabrina String's book, which was really what started this whole conversation, Fearing the Black Body, and how, you know, anti-Blackness is pretty much the root of everything, and how we're literally taught to hate our bodies because of anti-Blackness. So even thinking about how, you know, moving is, and how we're taught not to do it is tied to anti-Blackness, is just, doing it is just feels liberating, and it feels like you're just, you know, giving a big FU to everybody. So, yeah.
I can definitely piggyback on what you said. So as a drag performer, naturally, naturally, you know, I love movement. I love walking around. I love like being on stage and performing. Um, my main influence comes from dance. I come from a background of hip hop dance, jazz dance, African dance. Um, so when I came into doing drag performance, I started like incorporating the elements of OA voguing because I was always influenced by Paris is Burning and watching that when I was young. So I would like incorporate that into my performance a lot, along with African dance and how and um, voguing and queer movement is definitely connected to um, traditional African movement and posing, and how posing is inspired by, you know, like the way you saw like images of Egyptian images and African images and everything in between. Uh, I can definitely relate to you you know, when it comes to people saying that you're too big to be doing that. I've heard that a lot. Um, my style of dancing, I love energy. I'm very energetic. I love working up a sweat when I perform. I just love just feeling absolutely free and liberated. And people couldn't take that for the longest time. And it's to the point where when there were a lot of awards and stuff, not that it matters to me, um, I was like one of the last people that we chosen as best dancer because they don't see someone like me as someone as a dancer because I'm not on stage twerking, which is nothing wrong with twerking. I love twerking, but if you're not doing a certain thing as a Black queer femme, you're not seen at all. Thankfully, I made people see and understand that, listen, you're gonna get this body, and you're gonna get this body however I present it. I don't care. Um, I started making that known when I got into burlesque, um, and I started just outwardly expressing my love for my body and my love for my femininity through my body and my natural body, and doing performances that mean something to me in connection with stripping free of clothing in a artistic way and mixing glam and like a political statement as a Black queer fucking non-binary, I'm sorry to curse, non-binary I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, I'm sorry. As a non-binary trans person in this community. Um, it's just, I'm just so passionate about it because like so many people have told me that I can't do it. And I've always been put in the back burner because of my size. And I'm like, listen, you're going to get all of this out on stage and you're going to accept it because I know I'm beautiful and that's all that matters. And if I can do it, anybody can do it, and everyone deserves to be able to do it. So yeah, that's what it means for me.
Yeah, thank you both so much for sharing that. And Natalia, there was something you said that really resonated for me. I think growing up, the times where I felt the most connected to my body was when I was dancing. Like, I've been told stories of when I was a baby, I would just like go in the middle of the dance floor and like do my thing. And till this day, I feel like, yeah, that was always when I felt the most connected. One thing that I realized for myself in the past few years is that I like there's a huge disconnection between my body and my brain and my heart and like what I'm trying to do now intentionally. And so realizing that, movement is healing and movement is pleasurable. And you know, moving in this body is revolutionary in many ways, right? And so knowing that that is something that I can do intentionally to heal, to move in ways that feel pleasurable to me without like regard of what other people might say, you know, is a big part of that. It's a big, it's a way in which I get to know myself and I get to know what's happening, because if I am disconnected from my body, right, then I don't know what I need. I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know what I like. I don't know, you know, there's a lot of knowing that needed to happen. And, you know, movement in many ways. In the past few years, I've been challenging myself to explore movement that I didn't think I had access to, you know, or that I didn't think, you know, I could enjoy. And because I was shamed for it previously, like an example is I actually started jogging recently, which is, I never thought in the world ever that I could do that. And then it was kind of like a challenge, like I needed to prove something. And then I realized I actually really enjoy this. And like, you know, you don't often see fat bodies just like jogging. You know, so doing that with intention has been really healing. And just that exploration is really, really important.
That's really beautiful. One of the things that it sort of makes me think about is there's a way that you all describe this kind of this creative practice that is both linked to a healing that you knew you needed to do for yourselves. And so it's very interesting always that art is the method, that art becomes the healing path. That's the way to get yourself free. And at the same time, you know, to hold that as its intention with the fact that, you are engaging in a practice that is also structured by, all these same social hierarchies that make it difficult to live in the world. You know, the art worlds are also, fat phobic and steeped in anti-Blackness and classed and gendered and packed with all of these assumptions about who has the right to participate and who has the right to appear. And so I wonder that, if you would be interested in talking about how you knew you could be an artist, who you imagined yourself to be in sort of artistic lineage with, knowing that art worlds are also structured by a lack of representation of the kind of art that you want to see. So on the one hand, you are needing to create this kind of space for your practice, both for yourself and to call into existence an audience that doesn't exist until you make work for them. And on the other hand, this is a world that also is structured by all of these same kind of problems. So how did you know you were an artist? How did you know you could be an artist? Who are your artistic elders?
Well, in my case, I mentioned before my grandfather being a poet. He actually published a book and everything, and I wasn't able to meet him. He passed away when I was about 5 years old, so I don't really, yeah. So that's another thing to think about, like the loss of our ancestors very early on in our lives. I know that in his situation, it was tied to the fact that he had to go to war. And when he came back, he came back with, PTSD plus a lot of health issues that ultimately caused them to, pass away before we were able to get to know him, before I was able to even understand like his craft or know about his family, like know about my family on his side, like all of that is lost. And my grandmother, it's now as an adult, and I think about it, she was an artist in community building. I feel like her artistry to bring people together was just mind-blowing. My grandmother just had a way to be able to connect with folks and to bring people together. So our Thanksgiving dinners were just massive. I have more uncles and like extended family members that I can even remember. And people would literally just see me around town and say, hey, you are such and such's granddaughter. And I'm like, how do you even know this? But it's because she was great at community building. And my grandfather is known because he was a teacher. He was a poet. They both made sure that, you know, they did work in the community to ensure that, you know, their family was well, but the youth within the community was well too. And my mom, currently she's been working on a mural in her room for years. And she's just like, yeah, I'm just, you know, this is a hobby of mine. I'm like, mother, do you know how much people get paid to create what you did in this wall? So whenever I go back to the island, I make sure that I keep, you know, documenting her work, because she keeps adding more elements to tie in like different family members. So for me, she added an octopus because she knows that I love, you know, octopuses. So for my sister, she added a shark. For my grandmother, she added a rose. So she added all of this. And even for the youngest members of the family, as they keep being born, she keeps adding stuff. And yeah, and there are other artists in my family. They're just, I feel that they weren't encouraged as I was with, like, through my mom, because she was the one that was always there. And she was the one that always knew that I had the talent, and you know, it was just something that I was doing. I didn't even think, oh, I'm an artist. I was just, you know, I write poetry. And as people kept reading it, they were like, what do you mean you're not an artist? I'm like, this is just, you know, something I do. But yeah.
I feel like I was backed up into a corner by my ancestors. I've always been creative. My dad is a very creative human. And it was always like, yes, I like to draw. Yes, I like to make things, do things with my hands. But I also like denied and neglected that part of me for a very long time. And like, I have talked about, you know, with my therapist and other people, like how, you know, having been raised as a fat child and being a fat human for, you know, my whole life, like I am so good at like denying myself things that are pleasurable, you know. And like art, I think, is one of those things where I was like, oh, it's a hobby, or it's just like a thing that I love but not gonna be my career. And then, you know, I feel like I was literally backed up into a corner by my ancestors being like, you have to do this, like this is you, you know. And in many ways, like just like the universe like pushing me in that direction. And so that's been, you know, I'm really grateful now. I'm much better not denying myself the things that I love and like. And so in terms of like my ancestors, yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, just like my lineage, my literal indigenous ancestors are a big part, because like I said, paper making, altar making, all of that is ancestral work. I think about how Lara Aguilar, who's like a Chicana photographer, who documented her body out in landscape, um, is one of my ancestors. But I also want to like lift up people who are not at the ancestral level yet, because they're still with us, but who are in some ways like elders. You know, I think about like Roxane Gay and like reading Hunger and having that F me up in a big way. I was like, wow, you're reading me in big ways. I'm thinking about Ofelia Esparza, who's altarista I mentioned earlier, and then Amalia Mesa Baines, who's another artist who works with altars and ancestral practice. And more recently, somebody who I've been obsessed with for a while, but like his last collection of poetry, I mean, also really just, I mean, it was a mirror. Eduardo Corral, his queer, brown, Chicano poet, whose latest collection of poetry is basically about like body and lovelessness. And reconciling with that. And it's just incredible work, period. But to have someone just tell me how I feel through poetry is always a really intense experience. So anyways, shout out to those people for being awesome.
I guess my influences as far as like ancestors goes is definitely people like Crystal LaBeija. If you don't know who that is, she pretty basically started the ballroom scene. And even with the little that people shared of her in the stories about her, the fact that she broke out away from the New York City drag scene in the early 70s and created a whole world, a whole new world that ultimately became so influential in queer culture and pop culture and beyond for like decades, is definitely influential for me. Ballroom culture is like basically everywhere, and people have picked it apart and appropriated it and everything beyond. But the power of ballroom and the ballroom scene in queer culture stands and has not gone away and has not lost its soul. So definitely people like Crystal LaBeija, of course, Marsha P. Johnson, because she was a performer as well. People like Sylvester is a big one, a disco artist from the 70s and the 80s that that almost became mainstream for songs like You Make Me Feel Mighty Real. They were a really, really fabulous like disco artist and dance artist that discovered people like the Weather Girls. If you didn't know, the Weather Girls used to do background for Sylvester, fun fact. Yeah, a lot of queer icons like that, just because at a very early time, like in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, where being gay was still stigmatized, and it was still very dangerous to be out and be who you are. And for them to leave such a mark for people like me and people around me who are Black and queer and not thin, can you can just reach for the stars and create a whole world for yourself. And I hold that to my heart. And when I think I can't do something, I always think about people like them.
That's beautiful. Um, I could say a million more things, but I want to open it up to our attendees. I would love for you all to, feel comfortable dropping a question in the chat, or if you raise your hand, I think Abby can help us figure out how to pull you off of mute so we can just sort of broaden the conversation. And in the meantime, while folks are getting ready with their questions, I'd love to, just take a little bit of moderator privilege and ask one more question. Where, given all of the structures that we have talked about, sort of in preparation for this conversation, I'm really kind of marveling at the fact that this has felt like such a joyful space, such an incredible way to talk about art and life in a world that imagines that, art is just for a narrow group of people. And actually, you can be really expansive with your art making practice. Where is the joy in your work? I'd love to know for you, is it in the making of the work? Is it in the dreaming up? Is it the solitude of, coming up with ideas before you sort of share it with the public? Or is it in the moment that it hits the public? Is it the sigh after you've watched people consume your work? So what's the what's the joy for you? Where is it?
I guess I can answer that. For me, I love when I finally hit the stage. The whole process of getting ready and stuff is relaxing, sometimes stressful, but most of the times it's relaxing. I be in my space and I get to completely, fully realize me as a entertainer. But like when I'm on stage and you know I get to connect with people and get to be in the same space as people, that's when I finally, I enjoyed that the most. Even during the pandemic when I was just doing digital shows, nothing quite beats being in the same space as people when I'm like performing, and feeling the energy in the room. It's all about the energy in the room for me. So yeah, that's what brings me joy.
I would say that lately, uh, very early on, I would say that for me it was the fact of like, oh yeah, I got it done. Like, oh, I wrote it and I'm pleased with it. But now it's more of like the communal act of creating together that brings me joy. Those instances where I've been able to do workshops with children where we're literally just looking at art and they are diving into their emotions and what they know, and we are doing a poem together and just talking about like colors and emotions. And when you show them this is what you created, this is your poem, and just that feeling of like them feeling, like they actually created something, and we were able to share it all together. It's just been, I would say, like the joy of my work as of right now.
Everything I do is like so process heavy, and I really do enjoy that, especially with paper making. It's like really labor intensive, and I guess like even just like the exhaustion at the end of the day is really pleasurable. This is pleasurable, like sharing. And I feel like, I don't know about y'all, but I am, as I'm talking, I am discovering and learning at the same time. So
Me too.
Me too. Thank you. Thank you for that. This is so
Yes.
great. We have a great question from Jenna who says, if you could say one thing to your child self, what would it be?
um I guess I would say to my child self, oh my gosh. um, I would probably tell my child self to just be patient, um, and get to really love your love of performance early and do whatever it takes and do whatever is possible to follow your dreams and don't listen to whatever people have to say about what you should do and what you can and cannot do, especially the ones that think that all you are able to do is pick up a ball and throw it across the room. Yeah.
I think I would say, um, I would tell her that it's okay to be vulnerable, and there's nothing wrong with that. That you can be able to share your work with other people, and they either will get it or they're not gonna get it, and that's fine. that you can put yourself out there and know it's okay to say to people as well. Just, you know, and practice it often in front of the mirror. Say no, and that's okay.
I think I would tell my like child me that, you know, they were perfect just the way they were as a kid. I feel like there's that level of just like acceptance that is necessary for all children. You know, like I think about the ways in which we're trying to change each other and like, you know, even if it's like well-meaning and like from a loving place, you know, there's nothing actually more loving than just being told like you're perfect now, you know. And I think something that I wish I could have heard, and something that I try to communicate to people whenever I can.
I think we have to end there. Candy, I think we have to end with "You're perfect now." That's so beautiful and so necessary, I think, for so many people on this call, and in our artistic communities, to just sort of carry with them into the world. So I want to thank you for your work, for your vulnerability, for your openness, for your art, and just for your gorgeous selves tonight. I think that this has been such a brilliant, expansive conversation. Feels like a series of conversations. I hope it continues. I can't wait until the pandemonium is over and we are doing all of this in person again. But in the meantime, just thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you to our attendees for rocking with us. We went a little over, but I hope we all have a great rest of the night. I am going to meditate for the rest of the week on "You're perfect now." So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a
Thank
good
you
night.
all.
So much.
Feel free to
I'm
say
so
goodbye on your way out.
grateful. Huh?